comes out. Here we go. His eyes are red. They're, what's the word I'm looking for? Teary-eyed red. Bloodshot is the word I'm looking for. There we go. His eyes are bloodshot. He's sad. As he's coming down to the ring, he says, cut my music. Like, he doesn't want the fanfare. And, the audience is chanting CM Punk. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I used to love CM Punk too. And I know you guys, he tells the audience that he knows that he wants them to boo him because he's not the most likable person in the world, but he just wants an opportunity here to open himself up, right? He said Punk last week showed a photograph of him and a young MJF, and he said for him, Punk that was just another Friday, But for Maxwell, that was much more important to him. And then he starts breaking this down, right? He says, in 2007, I'm 11 years old. Tons of learning disabilities, severe ADD. Every day in school was hell. That's what he says. But the one thing he was good at was football. And he said he's going to school the next day, and he's got his tryout. He was successful in his tryout, and he's going in the hallway, and he says, this weird kid with all these disabilities, this little Jew kid, right? This Jewish kid, walks in the hallways, comes up to his teammates, and he says he's excited because he feels like for the first time he's going to fit in. He's going to get some friends. But they look angry at him. They're holding rolls of quarters, and they all throw the quarters at him as hard as they could, And they tell him, pick him up, Jew boy, pick him up. He goes home and he cries, he bawls his eyes out, but he realizes today was Friday, the day that he was going to meet his hero, CM Punk, at an autograph signing, right? And the day meant everything to him because pro wrestling, right? He said this, right? Pro wrestling is what got him out of bed in the mornings. That's what he always loved. He loved pro wrestling just like us. He loves pro wrestling. He said that day meant everything for him. And when he grew up, he was going to be just like CM Punk, and he was going to become the best in the world. He's going to be the best pro wrestler ever. And a couple of years later, he wants to train to be a wrestler. As he said, studying tape until my eyes bled, practicing promos in the mirror until my voice got hoarse. All because he wanted to be just like CM Punk. January 2014, Punk hits the bricks, leaves all of us, but leaves him. And that's when he realized that if the best in the world can't do it, what chance does some 5'0" Jew boy have? His words. So he went to college and pushed down all his dreams, right? Just like, nah, I'm not going to be a wrestler. I'm going to go be a good boy. Until he comes across a photo of CM Punk shaking hands with Bryan Danielson, a photo that he saw on Instagram or whatever. CM Punk, the guy who left him when he needed him most, was there, shaking hands with Daniel, and he was mad. He was livid, and he promised himself that he was going to be the best in the world in spite of CM Punk. He promised that he'd be able to do this, that whatever kid was being bullied and only had him on his TV screen, he wouldn't leave him high and dry like that gutless coward CM Punk. Does his catchphrases, CM Punk comes to the ring, no music, nothing. And there's this moment where they look at each other and CM Punk gets into the ring and he's like, and he asks him, is this true? Is this true? And MJF goes, it's true. And CM Punk is like, he doesn't know what to say. So MJF leaves and he's just standing in the ring. He's like, Jesus Christ, I think this promo's gotten universal praise at this point, right? I'm not mistaken about it, right? At this point, there is no one, or at least I haven't seen anyone going, it's got universal praise. And I can understand. Because I think there's a lot of good in this promo. I think it's interesting to have a guy like MJF whose job is to be despised and hated come to a point where it's like, look, you know, I want to tell you guys something. This is breaking me. This is ruining me. It's taking me down. And it's dredging back some stuff that I don't necessarily want to deal with anymore. You know, it's like this, it's what built me. This is what I am today because of what I've been through. But, you know, I think this is very interesting. I think that some nuance in characterization in wrestling is fresh as hell. Because you'll notice no one was really cheering on MJF. And you know why? Because we're wrestling fans. Because we were listening. And when I say we, I 100% identify with what I'm about to say here. I am 100% sitting there and saying to myself, okay, where's the swerve? When is he going to pull one of these and go, ha 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 ha, you suckers, you marks, I fucked with you. Like, when is this going to happen, right? But it didn't happen. Lots of sincerity in this. Lots of, CM Punk being completely taken aback. And it is this, like I tell you guys, I like to be worked in wrestling. I should be able to still be worked in wrestling. Wrestling should be able to do that to me. I got worked here. Because this is not the conclusion I was expecting. This is not the outcome that I was convinced was going to happen. I was like, Max is just going to tell us all to fuck off, that we're all gullible. But no. He's dejected. He's broken. He was even able to push out some tears as he was telling this story. The story about being bullied, his anti-Semitism, which, by the way, was a promo, and not exactly those same words, but he referenced those events in a promo he cut in MLW. So there's some legitimacy to this, I would dare assume. The great thing here for me, after all of this, and yes, very relatable stuff that MJF was talking about, and yet people were booing him. People were like, boo. I think there were shut the fuck up chants. Because it's MJF. I think what's great here is that he positioned himself as being very vulnerable. And AEW hasn't shied away from making its stars human, by making them vulnerable, by having like very human flaws. Of course, you know, the whole Adam Page thing is centered around that as well. And I think that's very refreshing. Because it's not something that we've been accustomed to. We've always seen pro wrestlers as being larger than life and, you know, just having always this constant focus on the ring, the ring, the ring, the ring. And then when the real world starts creeping in, you're like, oh, okay, these people are indeed human, right? And I like this. And I think that's what makes a guy like Adam Page relatable. I think that was a part of it. And I think that this wrinkle that MJF adds here is all the more interesting. And it's interesting because he has positioned himself in his mind as the hero in all of this. Because, like I said, just as we were all sitting around waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it's MJF after all, MJF is just pouring his heart out and saying, look, this guy who you guys say is your hero, your champ, he broke me. I looked up to him and he broke my heart. And I've been coming out here being all cutesy and so on and so forth. He wants to put me in a dog collar because pro wrestling? Well, I want to tell you guys that this weirdo that you guys are cheering for, that wants to make me bleed, he already cracked me. And I'm coming after him because I have personal business with him. CM Punk is the good guy, right? The voice of the voiceless and all that. And yet here we are, we're being spun around with this wrinkle, this new approach, this new this new vision of it, which goes to say, you never know what someone is going through or what someone has gone through. It's the same thing like when you interact with people on Twitter or whatever. You don't know what other people are going through. And MJF presented a level of humanity that we're not expecting from him. And you're like, oh shit. And that's ultimately what CM Punk is left with. It's like, man, I left wrestling because I couldn't take it anymore. How many other kids did I, or young adults or whatever, how many people did I sincerely disappoint then? How many people did I snap because of this? This is very interesting. Now, of course, this could all be a magnificent ruse by MJF, and next week he comes out and said it was all bullshit, you dumb bastard, you fell for it, CM Punk, you egomaniac or whatever, you know. And if that happens, I will admit that I will be a little disappointed at it. I'll be a little disappointed because the thing felt extremely real. And I will even go as far as to say this. I'll go as far as to say this. If anything, it has to stay this way. Because what this will mean is that CM Punk is responsible for MJF. He is MJF's villain origin story, essentially. That if CM Punk never became who he was, never pulled out of wrestling, we would not have MJF in the shape or form that he is today. We would have something else. CM Punk created a monster. He created the monster that is MJF. And I think that has to stay like that because it is a very interesting wrinkle in this entire story. It's really this idea that MJF was a good kid, you know, tried his best, so on and so forth, found inspiration, and the inspiration just broke his heart, kind of thing. Created a villain. I think that's the story you tell. And that adds a little nuance to CM Punk super babyface, right? The hero, the wrestling Jesus making his return, you know, apologies for the blasphemy, but you understand the analogy that I'm making. Coming back to save wrestling, returning in this ultimate perfect form, only to realize that he's human too. And that his actions, that the fact that everyone has considered him such as a larger than life character, as we were talking about, actually had some very real world implications for very real human beings. I think it's an interesting wrinkle. I'm very curious to see how they're going to work this next week. It's something that I wasn't expecting. Felt good. As you guys know, I was a little low on the MJF CM Punk thing. I felt they were going around in circles. This was fresh. And I'm very curious to see how MJF is going to use this, because MJF knows what he's doing. And this is emotional manipulation. He knows what he's doing.